let's talk about React components. So I have a very simple app. There is nothing in it yet, but I like to build a functionality. So let's guess that we want to, I don't know, build a profile view, right? You know that at Codery you can check your profile details, your score, your name, your, picture, all these things, right? So I would like to simulate that. I would like to simulate that, and we see how to organize our components in order to make sure that the setup scales. So if tomorrow we want to add more capabilities to the profile view, we can easily, append or attach these new sets of UI components to the screen. So the way I used to do that is the first thing we do here, we got the app component, which is like the root component. Obviously, we don't want to do everything in here because it's better to have specific components for each URL. That's why you got navigation. But as a starting point of view, I'll just reuse the app component to build my interface. So the first fundamental thing when we talk about React components is to understand the differences between stateful components and stateless components. So how do we know the difference? This is a stateful component. Whenever you see class, whatever, extends, this is a stateful component. And you will see that because that stateful component is a class, and because it's a class, it has several built-in methods. The constructor, the render, and we'll see others. That's a stateful. We'll see shortly how to create a stateless component and what are the differences, when should we use one, when should we use the other. As a rule of thumb, and that may not be the case on 100% of the scenarios, but probably 90, is every time you create a new view, right, when you navigate to /profile, the main component you have, in this case, again, is the app, but we'll rename it shortly. So every time we got that, right, that component, the root component, will be stateful, because stateful means that component will handle all your data for that particular view, right? In our particular case, that's a profile picture. What type of data do we have on the profile view? First name, last name, score, picture, all these things, right? So the first thing we do when we have a stateful component is to set up the data model. The data model is handled by something called state. What type of data the state is in this case? Is it a string? Is it an object? Is it an array? Is it an object? Correct, because it's an object. You see the curly brackets, line number 8 and 10. We can add properties on it, right? So I'm going to add the first name. First name. So let's do something a bit exotic. So it's going to be Wonder. Last name. It's going to be woman. And then we got the score of Wonder Woman is 94. And then we got, well, we can even have let's have a picture of the avatar, right? So to add the avatar, I'm pretty sure you already know how to do it. We have to download the picture from the internet. So I'm going to what? So Wonder Woman. Thank you for nothing. Wonder Woman. Thank you for nothing again. Wonder Woman. Right, so Chrome doesn't want to search, right? This is the type of things that sometimes happen. So if I go to Google, it's not working. Amazing. Right, I cannot get the picture of Wonder Woman. That's absolutely unexpected. Anyway, right. Here you go. Now it works in incognito. So let's try to find an image. Let's think about the proportions. Do you know how to get a picture of an exact size? And this is a bit off topic. Tools. Size, exactly, right? And then, for instance, if we want a 640 pixels image, then, yeah, so we can get any of these, right? Whatever. I'll take this one, for example. So let's save it anywhere into our project. I'll rename it Wonder Woman, right? So let's leave it there for now. Cool. So now, hopefully, if I check you see on my project structure, I got the Wonder Woman image in it. There you go. So, do you know what we need to do to display Wonder Woman? Import. Thank you, Chandon. Exactly. So the first thing is we need to import, right? Import Wonder Woman from wonderwoman.jpg, I believe. Maybe. Yes. So then in this variable Wonder Woman, I have the picture. So I can save it into the state because that's another property, right? That's the avatar. So the avatar points to the picture, right? For now. Obviously, at the moment, there is nothing on the UI because we are just preparing the screen, right? The state. Once we have our state set up, we can display it. For example, I'm going to rename the title. Instead of React Workshop Components, I'm going to set welcome this.state.firstName. Why this.state? Because we got this state first name. Easy, right? How do we display the last name? Correct. This.state.lastName. Right? Of course, because we don't have any space, it looks a bit weird, right? But eventually, right? Welcome, first name and last name. Easy, right? That's like the heading of our profile view. But then I want to display the avatar underneath. So let's do that. So to display the avatar, do you know how to display an image? Source on what? What's the tag name?
Image source.
img src equals to what? You tell me. Curly brackets and then what? What do we put inside? Wonder Woman. But we got that on the state. So I want to display the avatar. How do we display the avatar in here? Avatar. Wrong. This.state.avatar. Exactly. Right? So on the UI, on the render method, we should always rely on the state. We'll see in a minute why this is so important, but for now, you should trust that. The state manages the UI, right? So we got the image in here, it's working, even though we could complain about the alignment and things like that, but hey, it works, right? So we got the image. But then I want to display the image on the left and the score on the right. So I want to use a bit of flex box. So first of all, let's get the score. So I'm adding some divs around just to keep it better organized a bit. So then on the score, how do we display the score, even though it fits underneath at the moment? I would display the score here.
Just as a number.
I got the number here.
You just want to display a number.
Yes, I just want to. Well, we can. Yeah, fine. We can add some title on it, right? So we can say a. So her score is.
So would it just be this dot state dot score?
Exactly. Thank you, Yi. It will be this dot state dot score. So you see, it's the same pattern all the time. This dot state dot property name, right? So now if I scroll down, you see it's a bit small, but hey, it works, right? Of course, because we are very good UI designers, we can make the title, the score a bit more prominent, right? But now, because this is a bit unusable, I want to display the image on the left and the score on the right. So how we do that with Flex? And again, it's a bit off topic, but let's recap. How do we do that with Flex? A container, correct. So let's create a container on the parent, the elements surrounding the image and the score, container, and then on the CSS, what do we do with the container? Display flex, exactly, right? So if we do that, display flex, yeah, and now we got a very large image, but hey, technically speaking, it's there, right? So, and how do we make sure that the two children, the image and the score, have the same dimensions? Flex one where? On the children, on the direct children. Remember, class name. Can I call it column, for example? Yeah, you can call it item. I don't know. Bring your whatever you want, right? Anything that reflects what you're trying to do. So if I then column, then what? Flex one, right? Okay, and it makes sense. Still, I mean, the image is huge. Hopefully, we can fix it by doing that. Correct, right? So remember, images are a bit special. If you struggle to play with the dimensions, put it with 100% on the image, and then it will make sure that the image spans as much space as possible, taking as a reference the flex one. It's kind of a trick, but it works. And that, so don't pay a lot of attention about the CSS bit. I just want to build something like that, right? Because the score is still a bit small, I want to make it larger. So to make it larger, look at what I'm going to do. I'm going to add a new class name on the score called is huge text, something like that. So if I got that class name, as you already know, I can go to the CSS and say, hey, if I got the is huge text class name, then I can change the font size to something huge, like 160 pixels. Then we got it there, right? CSS. Any question? No? Okay, so we got our React component. Remember, we got the state on the as part of the constructor, and then on the UI, we just display the properties that we set up on the state. Easy, right? But then I'm going to do something a bit controversial. So imagine that we are implementing a real-time functionality. So if Wonder Woman is playing a challenge and she's submitted it, so her score has changed, we want to update the UI without having to refresh the screen, right? You got the idea, right? So eventually, instead of 94, after 3 seconds, we want to display 97, 98, whatever. So to do that, whenever we want to perform asynchronous operation, and I mean asynchronous, I'll repeat that a lot, because this is something that is not happening when you refresh the page. It will happen after a while, right? Please look at how we can do it. We can create a new function. So at the moment, we've got 2 functions, constructor and render. So we can add a new function here called component did mount. Why component did mount and not Boris Johnson? Because React decided to call it like that. So this is a reserved word, component did mount. There are others, right? So as you can see, you can start figuring out, so you can declare several functions and React will decide when each function is called. So when component did mount is called, look, the first thing that happens here, and we'll come back to this point in the future when we talk about debugging, breakpoints and things like that. But for now, the first function to run is the constructor. That's the first thing. Then we run a render. And then once the UI is ready, once we got that, React will invoke the component did mount. Component did mount. The component is mounted. The component is ready. So now inside of this function, we can bring our magic, right? So I'm going to say that after 3 seconds, the score will be different. How do we do that? Do you know the settimeout function? Settimeout. This comes with JavaScript. This is a very old function. So with settimeout, look. Oops. So here we said, hey, settimeout, whatever I write here, whatever I type here, will run after 3000 milliseconds, which is 3 seconds, right? So in here, I want to change the state. I've seen some of you doing that. If I want to change the score, I've seen some of you doing this. Not sure if this will work or not. It doesn't work. It definitely doesn't work. Why it doesn't work? Because you can say, hey, wait a minute. If I got a state object, why can't I do this.state.score and then I change it, right? That's the first thing that everyone tries to do. But that's not how React works. Unfortunately, if you want to update any property here, because we want to update one of these properties, instead of overwriting the property, we need to do that. Look at the difference. Did.setState, and then here we set the property that we want to change. So which property do we want to change? The score, correct. And what's the value of the score? 97, correct. So let's see if now it works. Look, 1, 2, 3. See? After 3 seconds, the score got updated. So remember, when you initialize a state, you do that. This.state equals whatever. Most of the time, this is an object, but technically speaking, it could be a string, it could be an array, it could be whatever. But most of the time, it's an object.
I'm a bit confused, because if that score is getting updated in real time, why are you hard coding it? Like, why are you putting 97?
Because it's just for testing purposes. So that could come from an external service. That could come from the backend. That could come from a database. That could come from anywhere. So this is just for simplicity reasons. We want to see how to change the data on the fly. Right? After 3 seconds, I want to change the data. Right? This is the correct way to do it. Remember, this.setState, and then look, we are passing an object. So in here, we can change as many properties as we want, right? So we can, for example, change the first name. Right? So after 3 seconds, it will change. Look at the first name. Oh, sorry. It's a typo. Yeah, where's the typo? Thank you, Tom. Correct. Correct. Thank you. So if we try again, 1, 2, 3. Here you go. Right? I'm going to remove that because it's a bit creepy. But it works, right? So you got the idea. Right. So that's the first thing. The first thing you should understand when you create a React component. And that will be pretty much it. I'm not going to add any new code. I'm just going to refactor it. At the moment, look at the render function. We got lots of things in here, right? Welcome, the image, the score. I know that you're thinking, hey, this is still quite simple. But because the UI is simple, but you can see that if we keep adding new functionalities, this will grow a lot, right? So because of that, my suggestion is let's try to split, let's try to refactor this into smaller chunks. And that's why now I'm going to introduce the stateless component, which is something that most of you have been already playing with. But let's recap that. For example, this is the heading, right? This comes on top of the screen. So instead of hard coding it here, look at what I'm trying to do. I'll try to do that. Right? So I want to defer the execution to a new component called welcome. That helps to understand the logic and the structure of your component. Because if welcome has 20 lines, I don't care, right? So it will be the responsibility of the welcome component to handle the logic underneath. So how do we create the welcome component? Let's create a stateless function. I'm going to create it underneath. We'll see how to refactor it afterwards. For now, to create a stateless component is as simple as creating a function. It's a JavaScript function with that name, welcome. And look at the capital W, right? So function welcome. So that function will return some HTML. For example, you see, it's a bit small, but it's there. We have connected the add component with the welcome component, right? So now let's paste what we had before. Look, if we paste the previous title, now unfortunately it doesn't work. Cannot read property state of undefined. This is happening because this is a stateless component. This is a function. It's not a class. It's a function. When we have a function, unfortunately, we don't have access to the state because this information is expected to be provided by the invoking component, by the parent component. So how can we pass the first name and the last name from here to there? Add a prop. correct. We can do that. Look, we can do first name equals what? Correct. And what about the last name? How do we pass the last name to the welcome component? The same, right? Last name equals this.state.last name. Will it work? Probably not yet. Look, still failing. Still failing because even though this is correct, this is beautiful, unfortunately, the child component is not capturing this information. It's just ignoring it. We can type whatever we want here that the child component will ignore it. And the reason is because, as I said before, stateless components don't have access to the state. So the way to solve it is, look, we are passing first name and last name, two variables, from the parent to the child. The way to capture these two variables is in here, because React built it in that way, we receive one argument. You can call it however you want. Most of the community like to call it props. So props is an object that has this property and that property. So you'll tell me, how do we display welcome wonder? Say it again. Jim? So this is an object. We don't have this. We just have props. Props of what? Correct. Look, boom. Right? How do we display the last name? Correct. The same, right? It's the same thing all the time. Exactly. You see? So remember, the way to send data from a component to a child component is on the parent component is just a key value, right? This is the name of the variable and this is the value of the variable. This is the name of the variable and this is the value of the variable. And on the child, props will have access to the first key and to the second key.
So what's the difference between this sort of statement? You can use either or use either one.
You can use what?
Can you use either one, props or this?
No. So on the parent component, this one, we always rely on this.state because that's a stateful component. On the child component, because it's a function component, we don't have access to the state. We have access to the parent props. So the parent is sending the values to the children, right? So this is about the welcome. But let's do the same thing. Let's create a new component with the details. Look.
Sorry, can I just ask though?
Yeah, of course.
The whole point of putting that welcome thing
Yep.
there was to shorten the code.
Correct.
But if my welcome now starts having lots of objects,
Yep.
that's the right word, that's going to just start looking as long, or potentially as long.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, okay. But that's why this is hierarchical. So one component calls another component, which calls another component. So you got eventually a nested list of components, right? We'll do that now. Look at we're going to do this example now. So here at the bottom, to handle the avatar and the score, I'm going to create a new component called, for example, details. Right? Still, obviously it doesn't work, right? But you get the idea. So now our main profile component is very sexy because it's very simple. Welcome and details. It's very easy to understand the structure of the component, right? So how do we create the details component? Now you're going to do that because there is nothing new. It's literally doing the same thing again. So how do we make this work again? You tell me.
Create a function.
Create a function. What's the name of the function?
Detail.
Correct. And then what? Props. And then what? Return. We paste it. Right? It doesn't work. Why it doesn't work? Say it again, Jin? Correct. Look, not sure if you noticed, probably not, but props is grayed out. Means, hey guy, you are injecting props, but you are not using them at all. Even worse, look at the error. Cannot read property state of undefined. Remember, is this a stateful or a stateless component? Stateless. We don't have access to the state. That's why it's called stateless, right? So what do we need to do in order to make the example work again? Say it again, sorry. Correct. Instead of doing this.state, we use props. Instead of having this.state, props. Right? By the way, this is off topic as well. With Visual Studio Code, there is a shortcut to select multiple tokens. Right? So now, because imagine that you got this.state 20 times. You can do it manually, right? One after the other, but there is a sexy way to change it. If I press, I think on Windows is Control D, on Mac is Command D. Look, you notice? So I've selected all the tokens that match the highlighted text, this.state. So now I can type once, and then props gets changed in both places.
So I just have a quick question. I'm not missing at the beginning. You just define this.state and from that.
So this.state, that's the first thing you do, and this is where you set up the properties, the variables, the attributes, the data that your screen will have. In this particular case, we are trying to set up the profile view of a user, right? So we want to display the first name, the last name, the avatar, the score, whatever, the email, right? We want to display some properties on it. That's why we set up the state.
So this.state is like a function?
It's not a function. What's that? Is that a function, an array, and a string? What type of data is this? It's an object, correct. It's an object. Technically speaking, you are right. It could be a function, it could be whatever. But most of the time, because we want to display data, the object is where the data is, right? So this is the most natural, in my opinion, way to display data on the screen.
So it's used for profiles?
For whatever, for profiles, for list of the best candidates, whatever, it's data, right? This profile is just an example, just data, right? Why it doesn't work? Where is the picture? What is the score? Correct. What do we need to do on the parent? Yes. So what do we put? What are we expected to put here? The parent is not sending the image. It's not sending the score. That's why the child, the details component, is unable to render anything, right? So how do we send the data from the parent to the child? This.state.
Not in there.
Not in there.
Whatever you need to assign it to an avatar or a score. Yeah.
Avatar. What? You tell me. Equals. Yeah.
Avatar, I guess.
Yeah. Right? Look. Boom. Right? We got the avatar. You see the same thing, right? It's literally the same thing. The same thing again, until your fingers start bleeding. So how will we pass the score? No excuses not to understand how to send the score to the details component. Score equals curly brackets. Boom. 94, 1, 2, 3, 97. Right? Easy. It's the same thing. Right? So what's the flow? First of all, we run the constructor, right? So after running the constructor, we run the render function. So our screen gets displayed because the render is internally executing welcome and details, right? And then after displaying the render, we call the component didMount function, right? And the important thing here is every time you call the setState, render will be executed again, which makes sense, right? Because if we change the state, it's because we want to re-render the screen. We want to change something on the UI. That's why how many times the render function will be invoked? 2, correct. The first one, that happens automatically, and then every time you call setState, render will be executed again. Any question? Right, what's the difference between component didMount and component willMount? Component willMount is telling you the UI is not ready yet. It will be ready. Component didMount happens after render. Component willMount happens before render. Right? most of the time, in reality, you can use either. I like to use component in mount because sometimes you need to wait the UI to be ready to change it, right? So to me, it's like a bit safer, but in probably 99% of the cases, there will be no difference. Right, so what's the benefit of splitting our logic into components? First of all, readability. Now, my profile view is way more readable, right? Because I can see that I have the welcome and details. If because of whatever reason, I don't want to have a welcome, look, just changing that, I get rid of the welcome, right? It's like building blocks, it's very easy. The second benefit of splitting your logic into smaller components is that you can reuse them, right? Can I do that? It's a bit strange, but you can see that you can call the component again, right? Of course, we can pass different data. So, right? So we can do that, right? Something, whatever, right? We can change the data, right? We can call it with different data each time. That's why components are that useful, because we can reuse them. Any question? Technically speaking, that's pretty much it. We can, following what Yi suggested before, we can create a new level of complexity by nesting the details component. What happens if you want to split that? We can do that, right? So we can display the avatar in one component and we can display the score in a new component. So we can look at what I want to do. I'm going to comment this thing here. I'll go back in a minute. So I want this to look like that. So this will be avatar, and then we'll have the score. So then the details is very easy to read. Avatar and score, right? Easy. So then you tell me, how do we do that? How do we create an avatar component? Function avatar, props, and then what? Then we got that code here, right? Return whatever the avatar is, right? Will it work or not? It doesn't look good, right? So because the score is undefined, I'm going to comment the score. So let's see if the avatar works. No errors, but the avatar is gone. Why? Correct. We have to pass the property from the parent to the child. It's the same thing all the time. How do we pass it? Props what? Dot avatar. Look, looks weird, right? It's red. Why? Remember, the props are a key value thingy. Key equals value. What's the key? Avatar, correct. Avatar equals props.avatar, right? Works. And what about the score? Let's do the same thing with the score, right? So you already know how to do it. Exactly. That's it. So I'm going to copy the score. I can get rid of the commented code. And then now on this score, return whatever the score is. And then, so as Caio was suggesting, score equals props.score, right? Will it take 3 seconds? Of course, right? So look at the logic. We keep our data handling on the root component, the stateful, right? We keep it on top, and then this is the boss. So the root component will decide what to do with the data, and it will delegate the UI into smaller boxes, right? This is a very elegant way to distribute your components. Is there any question?
You just scroll up.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So, as far as possible, try to stick to this syntax because this is simpler, right? It's simpler to create a function and return a piece of HTML than writing class and constructor and blah, 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 blah. That's why most of the time, this is what you'll be doing, stateless function. But, as I said, when you create a new view, when you redirect to /profile, the root component most of the time will be stateful, because if you don't have a, you'll figure out, if you don't have a stateful component, it will be impossible to refresh the screen, because there will be nothing that will trigger the refresh action. That's why, as a rule of thumb, when you navigate to a new screen, the root component for that screen will be stateful, and all the children component will be stateless, right? We can do that. At the moment, look, as I started the video saying that, look, at the moment we're writing everything on the app, but that's not very elegant, right? Because the app will have several screens. So let's create a profile component. Let's do that. So to create a profile component, let's create a new file, right? I used to recommend to create a new file for each component. I know that you're thinking, hey, but this is so silly. Why don't we join them in the same file? No, don't do that. In the long term, it's way easier to have one component per file, because it's much simpler. For instance, if imagine that I had this